Hello everyone, and welcome to Micronos. Yes, I'm finally rebooting this channel after basically being absent for 4 years, and to celebrate, I now have a microphone and much better gear, so there'll be a lot of cool stuff in the future. However, I wanted to start off this by saying that this channel is open to all age brackets. However, some of the content that I will be working with here may be for older audiences. So even though I obviously won't include any sensitive subjects here, given the subject matter, some discussions will be inevitable. So take this as your warning. And back to what inspired my return to this project has been Hotel. So the show, it currently is an 8 out of 5 for me. Everything that I could have wished for and more is here. All the characters are great, the songs are amazing, and my only criticism is that sometimes the writing can still feel a little amateur, but I fully expect this to get better in the following seasons. Now, for the backstory of the build. So, some of you may have noticed that this current clock tower is not what we see in the full show, and that is because it was the original clock tower that was in the 2019 pilot episode of Has Been Hotel, in which this clock tower timed when the next yearly extermination would happen, an event in which exorcist angels descended into the first ring of hell to exterminate the overpopulation of sinners there. So, since the full release of the show, this role has been taken up by the Embassy of Heaven. So, in future episodes where I continue building from this universe, there will be episodes featuring the new buildings. So in Has Been Hotel, there is a lot of lore that pertains not just to the city, but to the world itself. And there's a couple YouTubers that I recommend so you can understand. They do a much better job than I can here explaining the intricate lore of the world. But shout out to Finn the Pony, The Round Table, and Cartoon Universe for providing great coverage on the show. But essentially, Hell as a dimension is a set of 7 rings or layers, kind of like a planet stacked on top of each other, each representing one of the deadly sins. So this is the surface, right, or the pride ring, where the sinners who die on earth manifest every day. So they are immortal, and this has created a overpopulation problem and has also led to sinners being stuck with the worst aspects of themselves and actively encouraged to continue being worse, essentially, as the most ruthless of the bunch rise up and become overlords in a sort of neo-feudalist systems in which overlords rule different aspects of society, both through money, physical, and magical power. So moving on, the city itself is quite literally shaped like a giant pentagram in a circle, with the Heaven Embassy being in the pentagonally shaped center. And I would imagine this would be the central plaza facing right in front of, well, the central plaza you'll see in this build. And there are very drastic changes in living standards from one zone of the city to another, from massive super tall residential and commercial skyscrapers to old-timey American suburbs, homeless camps, and literal war zones, which are permanently in a state of ruin due to individual actors, organized crimes, and overlords itself. So this constant instability is the cause of like a lot of different issues, such as lack of resources, um, power vacuums, civil services can't really function efficiently. It is quite literally the ultimate dog eat dog world. Despite this, there is still some beauty that remains in the city and can be observed by some of the more hopeful elements, such as Charlie. So when I first started designing sets for Has Been Hotel, I had started obviously with the clock tower at a micro scale. And micro scale in my world of design is each Lego 1 by 1 block put on its side was worth 50 feet. Meanwhile, nano scale, which this city is at, would have each block representing 150 feet. So 3 times that size. That's how I'm able to build some other upcoming cities that you'll see on this channel. And essentially, for the city, I took inspiration from Chicago and Los Angeles. Starting with Chicago, I really liked the elements of the city beautiful movement, of the river, obviously, and the big density of skyscrapers there. It's a mix of classical and modernist skyscrapers. And as for Los Angeles, I was inspired by the metropolis's economy, It has a very like warm climate, celebrity culture. The entertainment industry is obviously huge there, and a vapid and consumerist society in which no one really seems to care. This is also a place, after all, that has a lot of socioeconomic divide, inefficient government, and a coastline and hills. So, it was a bit of a mishmash. And I think the style works out pretty good. I was a little concerned at first, but yeah. So before getting into any of the buildings, there is this large park behind, which was inspired by Grant Park in Chicago, and I like to call Rebellion Park. It's a large, regal embankment characterized by manicured gardens, statues, and memorials to Lucifer being kicked out of heaven, and other fallen angels like him. And as for the river that runs parallel, given that this does not appear to be the city itself, to be the official entrance of hell or the gates of hell, I imagine that the river Styx would be there, and instead this would more accurately be the Acheron River. So take that as you will. And as for why the water is green, I took inspiration from other content that has to do with demons, such as Doom Eternal, the video game, and the Oceans of the Ring of Greed in the sister show Hell of a Boss. Now, this connotates that the water may be toxic or acidic, but I didn't want a dark green, like polluted sludge to be seen here, at least not entirely. However, the more astute from us might notice this is scientifically inaccurate, as the oceans on here on Earth take the color of the atmosphere above us, which is in turn colored blue by the chemical makeup of the air. So, given that the skies slash atmosphere of the Pride Ring are a faded red, the water would be red as well. But I did not want to make it orange for it to be confused by lava, or red to be confused by blood. So. And as for the vegetation, I decided to make it shades of blues and purples and maybe even browns, as the sun that illuminates the world of hell appears to be a red dwarf star, which is much cooler and produces much less sunlight than our sun on Earth. Therefore, in order to absorb more light from the electromagnetic spectrum, the plants would be darker in color, as they would be able to absorb more visible light. So, and this also tracks scientifically, however, because the first organisms here on Earth to develop photosynthesis had a purple pigment before the fully developed green chlorophylls arrived in the plants and trees that we see today. And given that hell is technically supposed to be older than Earth itself, I and given that it is more like underground, right? It's supposed to be below us. It's an underworld. I wanted the plants to have more of a coral reef quality or a sea-based vegetation quality due to it being well under us. Also, do note that some of the video is not completely aligned with the audio, but that's okay. Eventually, when I have more time and I'll be more professional about it, I'll just keep increasing in quality. But starting off on the buildings from left to right, we have what I call the column tower. So, given that how, as we see in the show, is some sort of reflection of human society here on Earth, there's going to be also a lot of similarities, for example, in the architectural style. So this is a neoclassical skyscraper. So neoclassical skyscrapers may follow, and not just them, but a lot of other skyscrapers follow a three-tier design approach that basically mirrors a Greco-Roman column, starting with a base, a shaft, and then a crown. And to add a fun spin, I imagine that in hell there would be literally giant circular skyscrapers that are just a giant column. Imagine like a bundle of sticks or columns within columns design. So also notice the nice use of the Minecraft one by one tile for the top register here. And remember, as a general design rule, the more details you add, the more realistic it can become. The smaller tower right behind the column tower that I call the horn tower is like a smaller office tower and similar to the IMP headquarters again in the Hell of a Boss show. And my contribution here to design is that is to have two antennas or reflective of two horns, um, which would kind of also be like the John Hancock Center in Chicago. Beyond that, there is a smaller brownstone estate right next to these two buildings. I imagine it would be some wealthier patrons' estate, 4 to 5 stories in height, but being really ornate and spacious. This one I had ideas from, let's say, upper class estates in the Upper East Side in New York City. And directly surrounding the clock tower itself would be the secretariat offices, essentially, of the city, in which I took this design from the Palace of Westminster with the extreme Gothic elements, but as well from the placement of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Because to have these smaller buildings directly surrounding the very important clock tower would make sure that certain sight lines were preserved and the views to the enormous tower would never be obstructed by other larger skyscrapers, even if they would eventually grow up around it. So, yeah, except for the giant bank of hell that's right next to it, but yeah. When it came to designing the clock tower, I wanted it to be added to an older, smaller building behind it. And this massive increase in height would be for three reasons. Number one, the city would continue to expand and sprawl out due to the ever increasing population, as well as the need for the central government to have a symbol of power and intimidation, and finally to house all the new offices and government bureaucrats who would take up all this new responsibility as the city grew. So if you notice, the roofs are topped by a golden angelic sword, which would represent the eternal rebellion or opposition of hell to the heavens. And the little golden one at the tip is actually a rigid 33 millimeter hose, which the cut side is inside the cone itself, so you only see the nice part. And my contribution to the design would be, instead of a dome to accentuate the prestigious building, there would be a Gothic spire, also inspired by the central spire of the Palace of Westminster once again. Um, and the giant building next to the clock tower itself, the only thing that's really more massive is the Federal Bank of Hell. It's a building by the other of the deadly sins, Mammon, which I would imagine would have the biggest rivalry with Lucifer. After all, he is the king of greed, and there is an established competition between the two of them. So yeah, other than that, it's just a really massive tower. It'd be in the Art Deco style. And to the left of the clock tower, before I forget, you have this massive sort of chimney-shaped building. I would imagine in my headcanon that it would be the headquarters of the General Power Agency, the one that provides electricity to the rest of the city. Obviously, it has a very influential role to play. And I inspired the design off a modern interpretation of the Tower of Babel. So it'd be a modernist like version that's like all shiny metal, essentially. To finish this build, I wanted to include a central plaza here that would be the heart of the city, in this case representing the moment where Lucifer finally arrived in hell after being kicked out of heaven, and him climbing to the top of Mount Erebus, the tallest mountain in the afterlife, in which he would proclaim his kingdom. And you could also, as well, these little golden pins here are like lampposts, and the green is like little fountains that are spewing water. So yeah, I hope you guys found this first build in a while to be very interesting, and hope you guys check out the show and stay tuned for more episodes from me coming in the next 2 weeks, specifically to celebrate Chinese New Year. So be there.